Welcome to season 13 of the Parenting Aces Podcast, a proud member of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and this week we are visiting with Dan Schreiber of WearBands. WearBands is a relatively new fitness product on the market that involves resistance tubes that you actually, as the name implies, wear on your body. So I'm excited for him to talk a little bit about that and how it can be applied to young tennis players really of all ages, but because we're parenting aces, we focus on the growing athlete, and this is just a really cool product. Dan is generously offering all of you guys a 20% discount, so you'll have to check the show notes for that discount code. That will be on parentingaces.com. Just click on the episode link for the notes and for that code, and yeah, take advantage. He even offers a money back guarantee. So if you order them, your kid tries it, it's not working for them, you can return it for a refund. And we really appreciate Dan's generosity in that regard. So now sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Dan Schreiber of WearBands. Dan Schreiber, welcome to the Parenting Aces podcast. It's a pleasure to meet you. It took us a minute to find each other and get together and make this happen, but I'm really excited to share your story with the Parenting Aces community.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think we met at a conference in New York, right? The WTCA conference, I don't know, 4 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And, and touched on the periphery since then. So I'm glad we've had a chance to reconnect.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And just for clarification for our audience, your background is not tennis, it's football, but you were a collegiate football player. You understand what it takes to get to the level to play a sport in college, and certainly understand the physicality that's required to compete at the collegiate level. And so I want you to kind of talk us through the backstory of WearBands, how you came up with this idea, why you thought this was a good idea, and then we'll jump into more specific stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was a football player. I played lots of sports when I was young. I played tennis when I was really young and got into some other things after that. But, one of the reasons I got interested in WearBands when I first saw this concept of sort of wearing resistance bands on your body, which was novel when I discovered it and still somewhat novel today, was what was missing when I trained. I spent a lot of time in the weight room, like everybody's pumping iron. Then we'd go out on the field and we do agility drills and we'd run. I was a wide receiver, so we'd run our routes and all that stuff. At the time, I didn't really appreciate it, but when I saw this concept of wearing resistance bands, I thought, God, I wish I had that. We always lift weights in the weight room. We come out on the field, we run around with our bodies, which is good to an extent, but what we really want, in my opinion, was to sort of take that resistance into athletic movement, and not just separate it. Let's get strong over here, and then let's learn how to move over here without weights. Well, if you can, for the same reason weights work in the weight room, if you can progressively overload athletic movement, without disrupting the way you move, you're really onto something. And I think that's been missing in sports training for ever, in my opinion, because nobody kind of figured out a way to design a system that allowed an athlete to move at or near full speed in multi directions, with a piece of resistance that's not disrupting their movement patterns, but is adding this constant tension to those movements. And so when I learned about this system from an inventor, originally showed me sort of a picture of what's now a crude version of what we've developed, I thought, this can do a lot of good, for a lot of athletes, regardless of sport. As we've gotten into it and introduced it to the world, we've realized that lots of tennis coaches have either seen something like this, or we met some that tried to jury rig something sort of themselves that was really clunky, and they said, oh my gosh, I made something like this 20 years ago, but it didn't work very well. And so they seem to be familiar with the idea, and tennis has become, one of our biggest, customer bases because of it.
I love that. And, tennis is very movement focused, right? I mean, a lot of people will say the most important piece of tennis is footwork and movement and recovery and balance and all those things that go into it. Sorry, what can WearBands, what do they offer that just regular old resistance bands or tubes can't?
Bungees, all those things. Look, up until WearBands came on the scene, everybody knew, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could get an athlete on the court and let them move, and add some resistance to their movements? And so they took the best tools available, a bungee or resistance band. We're going to hold it at the waist and we're going to hold it while you run back and forth. So they're trying to, sort of mimic athletic movement, but they're doing it with tools that don't really allow the athlete to move the way they want. It's slowing the athlete down. It's pulling them from the waist, where we actually experience resistance gravitationally, vertical, not really horizontal. So is it better than nothing? Maybe, depending on the movement patterns. But I don't know how to turn this off.
You're a popular guy.
Yeah, I'm going to shut my phone off and then it'll stop.
Maybe do not disturb.
Yeah, there we go. How about just off?
Okay, or off.
Apologies. Yeah. So, everybody was mimicking movement. You still see a lot of that today. Bungee cords, medicine balls, ways to how do we add resistance and let the athletes sort of mimic movements they make. But what none of them do is really allow the athlete to move the way they actually move when they play. So bungee cords, tend to slow athletes down. You're pulling on them. They can't really move at full speed. When it comes time to change direction, bungee cords add sort of resistance on the way out that sort of pulls the athlete back. So if you're trying to train change of direction, you have to train deceleration, turning around, and then you want to apply resistance coming in the other direction, coming back to center court. So, there were a lot of holes in current resistance training tools, which did exist and still do exist. And with WearBands, we said, what, if you could put tension, on your body and allow the athlete to move full speed in any direction. So when they're accelerating, they have resistance from WearBands. When they decel, they're decelling against resistance, pulling them into the ground. When they turn around and in the other direction, they get resistance again. So, a lot of people have gotten used to, the conventional wisdom, the status quo, the tools that are out there. Everybody's using them. We're trying to get the point across that those are beneficial in some degree. But WearBands is sort of taking that concept next level. You can play a set of tennis in WearBands, so you can use it when you serve, you can use it when you volley, you can use it when you're hitting ground strokes, from alley to alley and move it back forth, and the resistance is always there. So if you like the idea of resistance training movement, you ought to love the idea of resistance training pure, real-time athletic movement.
So describe for us, and I'm going to have in the show notes, I'm going to have links to your website that has great videos, but describe for our listeners now the mechanics of WearBands. Like, what's it look like? How does it work on the body? And who is it for?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? The concept is very simple. Designing it was the difficult part. So if you could, we have a belt, and maybe people have seen this. Certain products out there have a belt and resistance bands. Sometimes there's maybe some people have seen attached down the back of an athlete to sort of a stirrup on their ankle. Well, the biggest problem with that is it's biomechanically unsound. You're pulling the athlete back. All the resistance is in the posterior chain of the athlete. And the reason people did that in the past, with some of those cruder versions of what we created, is because they couldn't figure out a way to put resistance on the front of the body. And really what you want equally distributed resistance on the front and the back. And that pulls you down into a really good low athletic position and makes sure that biomechanically, you're nice and balanced. So we have a belt. What we decided to do is create a sock that you put on your over your own sock, and you simply slide inside your tennis shoe. And it's a very comfortable sock. So once it's in there, you don't have to take it off when you're done. You can take the system off and you can leave our sock in there. So it's actually pretty quick to use, but you take our front bands and connect it to front rings on the sock, and you take our rear bands and connect it to rear rings on the sock. And the other thing that does, because we have a sock, it incorporates the foot. So, I don't have to tell you about tennis players and their ankles and their foot and how many roll their ankles and are out there with ankle supports. And And there's not enough, in my opinion, foot and ankle strengthening in sport, focused on that. But what we've done with our sock is incorporated the foot and the ankle complex into the resistance trainings. Now, every time you stop and you cut, you go the other direction, your ankle and your foot are actually experiencing the resistance along with the rest of your body. So it's something that makes our sock design, really unique. So other than that, it's very simple. I mean, it's a belt, bands going down the front, bands going down the back. You click them in, it sort of pulls you down, sort of like extra gravity. And you have to stand up against that extra gravity. And as soon as you do that, all your muscles, are engaged. And when you start moving, even a little bit of resistance can add up pretty quickly.
So there's nothing attached to the arms, to the upper extremities.
Oh, we do. We do have an upper body system, and some
Okay.
trainers and coaches out there around the world have started using WearBands for that. Originally we didn't have them. We had MMA and boxers saying, "Don't you have anything for the upper body?" We created an upper body system with a pair of gloves, with a band that goes from the wrist down to the same belt. And what
Okay.
we found, a lot of tennis coaches discovered this and said, "Oh, this upper body system's actually pretty good too." It's not a sort of conditioning movement part of the training, but for people that are working on players that take too big a looping backswing and they want to shorten the backswing, well, our band sort of limits the backswing and gives them a proprioceptive feel. Now the athlete can feel where the proper positioning is, and that's both with the hitting hand, and we've had even we have a coach in Europe, Tomas is his name. I'm trying to think of his YouTube channel, but he likes the fact that you can train this arm and this arm. He said a lot of people in tennis sort of collapse this arm when it should be sort of out here. So our upper body system acts as a really good, like, proprioceptive training thing to give people a feel, where that racket should be. Don't take it back too far, those kinds of things. So yeah, we were surprised by that, that some tennis coaches, really enjoyed the upper body system as well.
Yeah, I think this is so cool. Is there a minimum age or weight or height that this is appropriate for?
Yeah, our minimum age, it's not so much by age, it's really by height. Anybody about 4'10". We have three sizes because you can't have a resistance bands for your legs the same for somebody that's 5 feet tall as somebody that's 6'3". So
Yeah.
it just wouldn't work. So the one size fits all products, and there's a few things out that are like that. Unless you're the perfect height for that particular band, it's either going to be too tight or it's going to be too loose.
Yeah.
So, we think that was sort of a shortcut we didn't want to take. So we created three sizes: small, medium, and large. And they run about over a range of about 6 inches. Anybody with about a 6-inch height can use it. The minimum is 4'10". We didn't have it wasn't a magic number for anything, but we felt like that gets kids about 10 years old or so, 9 or 10 years old, are getting there. We have people calling us with 6-year-olds. I'm like, look, you shouldn't even be resistance training your kid. He's 6 years old. Let them discover their own body, learn how to use that. And we figure when you get to about 10 and you use our lightest resistance band, because we have multiple levels of resistance, now you have a really nice tool for about a 10 or 11-year-old that's just getting introduced to, functional resistance training. So anyone 4'10" up to about 6'10" can find the right size band for them.
Very cool. For a child that is just starting fitness training, other than, running around the playground doing the monkey bars and all of those things, which, by the way, I'm a huge proponent of. Let your kids go to the park and run around and use the equipment in the playground. But once they are ready for a more organized fitness routine, how does using WearBands differ from, let's say, having them use hand weights or, some medicine balls, as you mentioned before?
Right. And they all have applications if done properly and they're not, overloaded. The nice thing about WearBands, it doesn't weigh anything. It weighs about a pound and a quarter. And with a pound and a quarter, you can, add as little resistance as you want. And we've had, NFL linebackers that we could bring to their knees if they have enough resistance. But the nice thing about it doesn't weigh anything. So there's no impact on it, especially on a growing kid's body. You're not adding weight to add resistance. You're adding, gravitational, what we call no mass, resistance. It doesn't weigh anything. So that's the real advantage, I think, for youth athletes. Barbells, dumbbells, if they're done right and you're not overloading the kids, they have their advantages. The other issue with dumbbells and barbells is they're dead weight. the weight's just going down. Wherever you're holding it, gravity is pushing that weight down. Wear bands, because it's attached at the waist, wear bands is applying resistance in multiple vectors. Whichever way you're moving, whatever angle you're moving, which is what your body really wants. You're getting resistance. It could be at this angle if you're pushing up. It could be at this angle if you're standing tall. So it's a much more biomechanically, athletically accurate way to apply resistance to the way the body actually moves versus weights, which are just dead weights. And it's not that they're not useful, in certain ways, but what they can't do, you don't want to put a weighted vest on a kid. You won't, and with all due respect to some other people out there, and everybody should use whatever they want, but holding putting a big jar of water on your shoulders and running back and forth, is so disruptive to an athlete's center of gravity, not to mention the potential, injury issues with that. But it sounds great. Hey, I'm just going to load this thing up and put it on my back, and I'm going to run around with it and add resistance, but it's really not, how your body's designed to move. And with a no mass system, you can just move the way you're supposed to move without getting those, you get the benefit without the potential downside.
One of the things with young athletes, with growing athletes that, is a big concern, of course, is overuse injuries, especially for a sport like tennis, where it does require repetition, daily repetition, really, to master the strokes, master the movements. And one of the things we've seen over the years is young athletes, especially those going through puberty, are prone to some really severe injuries that we used to only see in adults, and now we're seeing in kids. And this has been going on since I've been doing Parenting Aces, and maybe even before that. So can you speak to that a little bit and speak to the importance of training the body the right way at the right stage of physical development?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's been an issue in tennis and other sports for years, really young
Yeah.
athletes, burning out before they're 20 years old. And and I think a lot of coaches and trainers have sort of tuned into that recently. I think it's gotten better, but still, it's the mentality of athletes and coaches, right? They want to outwork their opponent. Well, that's great, but you don't want to outwork the place that you're, damaging your body. And so, and that's another issue around our system. Mark Kovacs, which a lot of people have heard of, he's in Atlanta. He does a lot of tennis research and stuff. He was kind enough to try WearBands. I don't know, it's probably been a year or two ago, and wrote a very nice white paper. It wasn't a scientific study, but one of the things that he valued most about the system was because it increases the intensity level, not a lot, but a little. He felt like you could get a more efficient workout in. Like, I can do the same drills I used to do with my kids for half an hour, I can do it for 15 or 20 minutes. Or instead of doing that drill for 15 minutes with wear bands, because the added intensity, I can cut down the reps. So I think in his paper, I think he felt like you could probably cut down reps by about 25%, with our system. So you can get in, do the drill, get the benefit you want, but don't, have the athlete out there doing thousands of reps and wearing down. If you're out there training 3, 4, 5 days a week, you can run yourself into the ground. So yeah, look, I mean, I think people are tuning into the fact that you want to get the most productive, efficient workout you can, and then let the body recover. And that's, more important for younger kids than for anything. It's really important at any level. You even see, Alcaraz and some of these other pros, they're getting injured already. They're 20 years old and they're sidelined more than they're playing. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a concern in sports. And we think that we have a certain advantage because it ups the intensity and ups the intensity and the productivity of the workout and reduces the time. Let your body rest and let it recover.
Time is a premium, a premium factor for especially kids, because they're balancing school, they're balancing tennis training on court, off court. They've got to have a social life in there. They've got to have family time in there. And it is tough when, you're trying to fit all of this into your 24 hours and make it work efficiently and effectively. So I love anything that can cut down on the amount of time while still giving the intensity, still giving the results that the athlete's looking for.
Yeah, and the coaches too, right? I mean, coaches, they get these kids coming in. I got an hour to train this kid. I got an hour and a half to train up. So coaches are overwhelmed by, how do I train these kids? I'm only going to have them for an hour. What can I do an hour and a half, or whatever the session is? And again, we looked at some of the training aids out there. I hate to pick on the bungee. The bungee has certain uses, but we pick on the bungee because we know that what we're doing is more efficient than what the bungee's doing. But if you have a bungee training, okay, we're going to work this way. We're going to do 20 reps that way. Oh, now we got to do 20 reps this way. Oh, now we got to do 20 reps that way. And everything has to be done in both directions because it's a single direction, application of resistance. And what we try to tell people is like, look, if you're have our system on, you can run them to the left, run them to the right, run them to the left, run them forward, run them backwards. You don't have to change positions. You don't have to do half this way and then half that way. And so look, WearBands takes 1 or 2 minutes to put on. Well, we get it. But we think when you're done with your workout, you get to do so many different things without having to do everything in one direction and everything in the other direction, that you actually work out more efficiently. So we have coaches and academies around the world now are using the system, and I think they've discovered that, oh, okay, well, we got to put the system on before we start to work out. But once it's on, I can go through 20 minutes of drills, which would have taken me 30 or 40 minutes, doing everything twice in both directions.
Yeah. Well, and I see this too as one of those things that a player puts in their tennis bag when they're going to start their warm up before a match. It's a great thing to put on and go through your warm up routine. You're going to get that extra bit of resistance that's going to get the body ready to compete efficiently, move efficiently, all those things. And then for the cool down as well, putting it on and doing your stretches with that extra resistance is going to help the body gradually get back to where it needs to be to recover and then be ready to compete again the next day.
Yeah, it's a great point, because it's not all about the training. We have track and field's another one of our sports where people have sort of gravitated to WearBands, and we have a lot of them using just for that. Let's activate the nervous system before our workouts. Let's activate the nervous system before we're about to run our 100-meter dash. So warm up, cool down. And it's not all court movements. So we have people in the gym, plyometric work, strength work. It's not all about movement. I'd say for tennis, on the scientific side, we have some really valid studies that show that it improves movement. But WearBands is just extra gravity. So it's just, whether you're doing plyometric work, strength work, agility work, doesn't matter. It's amplifying the results of whatever session you're doing. So yeah, we have people that use it for a lot of different things. So we give it to the coach. The other thing that we like about it is you're not changing your drills. You're not, you have certain drills, certain movement patterns, plyometrics, weight, whatever it is. With our system, it's not a system that involves changing your programming. It's just a matter of putting it on. So it's amplifying the results and the adaptations that you're after, but it's not telling you, how to train.
So does the product come with suggestions of movements to do? Is there a YouTube channel where people can go and watch videos? How do you get people kind of acclimated to using WearBands?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and it's one we've struggled with because we have so many different people using it in so many different sports. And I won't pretend that we're great at the programming side. We have a YouTube channel. It's got, depending on your sport, our YouTube channel has some content from us, some content from tennis coaches. A lot of people know Nathan Martin. He's down in Australia. He's been training people for a long time. He's a big fan of our system. He's done some training videos for us. We just started partnering with Fit for Tennis, and they've created some really good training program. So we're starting to reach out to certain trainers that we like and that like WearBands, and so that people can start to tune in and say, hey, what exactly are people doing? We have lots of ideas on our YouTube channel showing people from all over the world using the system. So that's more of an idea generator. It's not a specific workout, but this is what people are using it for. And we're trying to create more and more specific content. But like I said, nice thing is a lot of coaches and trainers, they have their programming. I like this drill. I like that drill. I like to do this. I like to do that. So we're not saying, stop, don't do that, do this. We're saying, look, we're not interrupting what you like to train at all. We just think we're giving your athlete, more out of that same workout than they were getting before.
So we will have links to all these videos in the show notes on parentingaces.com. So never fear if you're like, oh, this sounds like a really cool thing, but I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. We're going to take care of you. So Dan, what's the price point on it and how do people get it?
Yeah, we have two different systems. We have a lower body system that comes with 3 resistance levels and 5 resistance levels. And we did that because most youth athletes, our first 3 levels of resistance, they're different color-coded bands that you can use. The first 3 levels of resistance are more than enough for most youth athletes, probably at least up to 15, 16 years old. And so it helps keep the price point down of just saying you don't need those 2 strongest bands. Maybe if you're a, elite high school player or you're a college player, okay, you probably want the 5-level system, but for most kids, they don't. So we have a 3-level system, which you can buy just the lower body, and its price point is $79.95. And then our upper body system, which we talked about, comes with 2 more resistance levels and a pair of gloves if you like using it for upper body. That's just an add-on. It's $19.95. You can, when you're ordering, you can choose to order that or just stick with the lower body system. And then we have our 5-level lower body system, which is $99.95. So if you get the whole system, it can range from $99.95 to $119.95 for the 5-level lower body with the upper body system.
And the resistance tubing itself what's the life expectancy on that?
Yeah, that. I wish we could predict that better, but I know if you take good care of your bands, and I'm as guilty as anybody else. Sometimes I don't put them back in the bag, or I throw them and they get nicked or cut. Okay, they're resistance bands; they can break. No harm if they do. Some people look at our system. We've had the question, oh, what happens if one of those bands breaks? What's going to happen? Well, before we ever started selling the product, we sort of figured that out, and we and all the hardware in our system stays attached to our attachment ring. So if a band breaks, which it can, you're not really going to know. You're going to know it broke, but the hardware never moves. It can't fly up in your face. None of that can happen. So
good.
Band will break. It's not under that much resistance. Usually the way we've designed it, it rarely even touches your body if it breaks. But they can. I'm not going to pretend they don't. But if you take good care of your bands, I'm using the same system I've had for a year with the same bands on it. I take good care of them. They don't wear out. Their resistance bands, they'll stretch out after some point. If they feel like they're getting a little too loose, one nice thing about our system is you always have the next level up. Okay, well, this one I've stretched out. I think I'll go to the next level. And if you want to come back, we have very inexpensive replacement bands on our site. So if they get stretched out or break, you can easily come back and order them very inexpensively. We have a 90-day warranty on everything. So if anything breaks, a band breaks, something's not right, we're very liberal about, don't worry about it. We're going to send you a couple more bands.
Love that. Love that. Well, I'm excited about this product. I think, anything that our athletes can use to help maximize, as I said, their time, maximize their efficiency, and keep their bodies safe, especially the kids that are still growing, is a big bonus. And I hope that any coaches watching this will, if you haven't already, check out WearBands and start to kind of understand how you can incorporate this tool into your training sessions with your junior players. College coaches, my goodness. This is a phenomenal thing, especially when you're on the road with your team, and it's a way for them to squeeze in workouts at the hotel that you're staying in, or if they're at somebody's home. I just think this is such a great thing for everybody to have in their bag, and the price point is certainly very reasonable. Yeah, I'm excited about this. I think it's a really great innovation.
It's an innovation, like all innovations. It takes a little time for people to hear enough people. But I mentioned some scientific research. I don't know if people know Dario Novak. He's a well-respected trainer and researcher in Croatia, of all places. But he actually submitted a scientific study to a journal, and it was published. He took, I think, 10 or 15 elite youth tennis players or advanced youth tennis players as a control group. They weren't training with WearBands. He took 10 or 15 that were training with WearBands, ran them through the exact same drills he's always put them through. And after 6 weeks, he saw, statistically significant between 5 and 10% increase in change of direction speeds, and acceleration speeds. And so if anybody does have any questions, we have lots of coaches all over the world, Australia, Europe, the States, that are using the system. And so I'm the founder. I sort of created this thing. No one should listen. No one should believe me if I tell them it worked. I understand that. Well, I wouldn't if I were in the other, but we do have lots of coaches. They're not getting rich off WearBands. We do have like a little affiliate program, but they'll just give their honest opinion. So if anybody wants to talk to some of their colleagues around the world and say, what is this thing and why is it, what's so great about it? We're happy to make those introductions.
And we know in tennis, a 5 or 10% incremental improvement can be the make or break it, right? I mean, tennis is all about small margins. So
it's about small margins and move, like it's about movement. I mean, Roger Federer famously said, "When I move better, I play better." And he's also famously said, "All the best players in the last 20 years have always been the best movers, and it's always going to be that way." So 5 or 10% increase in speed, change of direction speed, getting back to the ball, getting there sooner to set up for your shot. I mean, all those little, no matter how good your technique is, right? If you're reaching for the ball and you're not getting there in time, doesn't matter how good your technique is. And our system also has a built-in like endurance component too. So we've also done testing with muscle oxygen depletion and things like that endurance athletes, like they have a lot of speed skaters that are now using WearBands because of its muscle endurance capability. So while you're doing all these other drills, you're building this muscle endurance. And so, in the third set or the fifth set, when your opponent's dragging a little bit and you're still able to move and maintain your technique, what's that worth to a player?
Yeah, it's invaluable for sure. Well, Dan, thank you so much for sharing WearBands with us. And I hope all of you watching or listening will check out the video links in the show notes on parentingaces.com. We'll also have a link to the WearBands website where you can see all the products and choose which one is appropriate for your player or players. Dan, I hope you'll come back and update us when there's more to talk about, but you always have an open invitation here on Parenting Aces, and it's been a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's so nice of you to have me on. We're a small company. I run most of it myself. We're not making lots of money. We're not making really any money, between still
I know that feeling.
We just think that we have something that's going to help. It's going to help people, something that's been missing, in the market. My mission is just to get it out in the world and say, hey guys, this thing, works. You don't need a lot of expensive equipment. You don't need a lot of time. And so try it out. You don't like it, send it back. So we're not big business. We just have something we think can help people. And we appreciate people like you having us on just to let people know in the world that we exist.
Love it. Love it. Well, thanks again for sharing your time with us and sharing WearBands with us. And to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We will catch you next time on Parenting Aces. Parenting Aces is providing this podcast as a public service. Reference to any specific product, service, or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Parenting Aces, Lisa Stone, or Fit for Two, Inc. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on this program is not and does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Always do your own due diligence before purchasing, hiring, or using any product, service, or provider.